This is Cody. He's in his 20s, and in 2023, he did something that most people his age can only think about. He bought his first home. But what makes his story a little different is that he just didn't buy a place to live, he bought with a plan. And today we're sitting down to walk through exactly how he did it, what he learned, and what you need to know if you're thinking about doing the same thing. He currently has a property that not only does he own, but has cash flow from month to month. So part of the beginning of this process is when I meet with the first-time home buyer, it's all about planning, because a lot of times they're not in the mindset of, am I buying this for a future rental property or not? And a lot of times they're just buying it because they want to get into their first home. And when I met with Cody and Brooke, one of the things that we really talked about is that, do you want to start a real estate portfolio? Initially, that was not a conversation that was on the table, and kind of just wanted to get established into a neighborhood where they could be there long term. And I think after talking and kind of going through some scenarios about how that looked and how we had a property that was available that might be able to fit exactly how that could be put in place, where they could buy their first investment property. It was not going to be something that they stayed in long term, and it would allow them to not only build equity in the property, but also allow them to save money. So when we first kind of started talking about this, originally you really wanted to be in the Camas and Fisher's Landing area, because that was like, you were planning on starting a family, and that was kind of where you wanted to land.
Yeah, correct. We wanted to Camas, Fisher Landing area is definitely where we wanted to be for our child getting into school and stuff. We didn't have a plan on when we wanted to start a family, so we weren't set on that. And we kind of, the market wasn't great at the time, so we were a little more open to location, moving our location for, a short period of time until we could get into something in that area.
Yeah, because when we were initially looking, a lot of the properties were just not meeting the criteria of what we were trying to find. And that's where really we started talking about, maybe if we find something that can be an investment where you can have somebody paying half or more than half of your mortgage, and then that would allow you to save more money, because you're, for the price that we were looking at, for them to purchase, obviously they would be paying their full mortgage. And if they bought something that was a duplex, or for this instance, we'll go over what he bought in a minute, then that allowed them to be able to save money for the house that they actually wanted to save. During this transaction, before we actually even got our offer accepted, one of the things that we were able to accomplish for Cody and Brooke was, not only did we get their closing costs paid for, but we also were able to get assistance from the seller in a rate buy down, which essentially brought their payment down even further for the first 2 years. So not only in the first 2 years were they saving money on their mortgage because of the rate buy down, but obviously they're getting the additional money in from the rental as well. So there's two different ways that we can actually get money to you and allow you to accelerate how you're saving money to purchase for the next property. And that was one of the real key things to this, is that the affordability of this became even more attractive because we were able to negotiate those terms.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, just where the market was and what we could afford, everything that we were looking at in that area needed a lot of work, and we didn't want to have to put more money into a property or a house, essentially, so that we could live there. So the property just worked out better for us.
So one of the things that we really needed to talk about if they wanted to start a real estate portfolio was the importance of buying a property that would be extremely rentable when they go to move out of it. And part of that, when I talk with my first-time home buyers, it usually is talking about trying to find a duplex, and if they were willing to live on one side and rent out the other, because that's typically how you're going to find the best scenario in order to save money to go to your next property, is if you're willing to make that sacrifice to live in a property where you also have a tenant at as well. It just depends on what your threshold of being able to handle being next to a tenant and you being a landlord. And one of the things that we really talked about is that I think when we started bringing all this to light is that maybe in the future they would want to have a rental property. And the reason that this is ideal for first-time home buyers, if they're able to afford it, which that's key, because you're going to have maintenance on these types of properties, is that if you look at buying a property, if I was an investor and I was going to buy this property behind me, and Cody is a first-time home buyer and he's buying the same property behind me, well, let's just say he put 20% down and I put 20% down, because I'm buying it as an investment property, my payment automatically is going to be higher, because as an investor, I'm considered high risk. And so I'm going to get a higher interest rate, which is usually about a percentage higher than whatever Cody as a first-time home buyer would get. And so what we really started talking about is when you buy a home and it's owner occupied, you're going to get an owner occupied interest rate. And later on, when you decide to move out and turn it into an investment property, then you still get to keep that owner occupied interest rate because you bought the property as owner occupied. So what immediately happens is that if we have the same scenario where we're putting down the same amount of money and we decide to rent this property out at the same time, Cody is automatically going to have more cash flow than me because his interest rate is lower than my interest rate. And I think that was kind of one of the things that was enticing is that being able to get into a rental property at a low cost, which is going to bring the payment down when it comes time to rent it, and then getting cash flow on top of it.
Yeah, definitely. We didn't have a bunch of cash to put down, and like Jamie was saying, investor versus first-time home buyer, you don't have to put as much cash down. You don't have to put 20% down, and you get a lower interest rate. So that was super appealing to us for that reason.
Because we found a property that they were willing to, this property is unique versus what I would normally try to talk with clients about, because usually, like I said before, in this scenario, we're typically talking about buying a duplex and living in one side and renting out the other. We happened to find a property that had 2 homes on it versus a duplex where it's attached. And so in this scenario, it was pretty unique, and it was a great opportunity for them to still live in a house and have a rental property on this property as well. What would you think in terms of how it helped you accelerate saving money to get to the next house that you wanted to get to? How did that help out?
Yeah, so Jamie helped us find this property. We sat down and looked at the numbers of it, how much we could afford to put down, what we'd be paying monthly, and it just made sense considering we have someone living in another house on the property paying half of our mortgage. We were able to expedite our savings, and we were able to purchase our next property, which we just purchased a few months ago. So we buckled down 2 years here, had someone paying half of our mortgage, and it helped us save super fast, and we bought our next property.
Yeah, and I think the important part of this is that yes, you can go and buy a house and have plans to turn that house into a rental property in the future, but the key thing here is that when you find a property, like I said before, specifically a duplex, where you're having somebody rent out the other side, that is what allows you to save money quicker versus just going and buying a property to use it as a rental in the future. Because if you're going and buying just a single family residence, you're paying that entire mortgage. Versus where Cody and Brooke, when they bought these properties, they're living in one side or one home, and then they have tenants in the other side. And like Cody was saying, it just, because you have somebody paying half of your mortgage, you can take all of those excess funds and put it into savings versus if you were just paying the mortgage fully yourself. So what I really want to drive home is that if you are a first-time home buyer and you're looking to purchase your first property, you really need to think about what your plan is and plan it out, because this scenario, like what Cody and Brooke did, is for some people, and for some people it's not. But if you want to become a real estate investor and start building your portfolio, having that first home that you purchase is the best way to do it, especially if you are able to be disciplined and be able to handle having a tenant on the other side of you and being a landlord over them. I think long term, this is really going to benefit Cody and Brooke, just because of the fact that, one, it's already hard enough to buy real estate as it is today. And to be able to buy multiple properties within a couple years of each other is something that I think a lot of people strive for. And you can do it, you just have to have the plan in place to do it. And before you buy your first property, really think about, if you want to become an investor, is this the most ideal property I should be buying, or am I willing to sacrifice another 2 years to get to the next property, which Cody and Brooke did? They were able to save a huge amount of money during that time frame. Rents went up, so that means that from the time that they purchased to the time that they went on to their next property, they're already not only gaining equity, but when they moved out of their portion, they were able to get more rent because rents went up in this area in general. So you have to think about everything long term. You kind of, when you're buying these, you're not buying them to turn around and sell them in a couple years. You are keeping and holding them so you have that true real estate portfolio, and that way you're able to, build equity and everything over time, which I think really put Cody and Brooke in a great situation long term. So if any of this piqued your interest or resonated with you at all, and you have more questions and to see if this scenario is right for you, feel free to reach out to me as a resource, and we can definitely come up with a game plan for you and kind of find out if this is going to be the right trajectory for you as well. I'm Jamie Mushaw, and we'll see you on the next video.